Madam Chair, you are now live on YouTube and being recorded.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Hello. I don't see the rest of council popping in, or is it just cameras?
I see you.
There we go. I hear you, Councillor Watt, but I don't see you.
Well, let me see if I have. I'm just doing this for the first time on my. There we go.
On the new device. Great. Councillor Verwoerd, welcome. All right, fantastic. Well, welcome to today's December 6th special council meeting. We are going to be acting as if we're typically in the chambers and follow our regular policies and procedures. So if you do wish to speak, please raise your hand on a matter and I'll call on you. If there is anything that we're voting on, and when I call for the vote, I'll ask for all those who are in favor, and then I'll also ask for all those who are opposed, and you will physically raise your hand to vote in the matter that you wish to vote. So before we get started, calling the meeting to order, I'm looking at this note and I don't see that motion on here yet. We're just going to start by going over the roll. So when I call your name, please raise your hand and state your presence. So Deputy Mayor Nelson.
Present.
Councillor Watt.
Present.
Councillor Verwoerd.
Present.
And Councillor Johnstone. You are muted, sir. You might want to find, I can see it's good. You don't need to be off mute, but you may want to be able to find that button in the event that you're ready to speak.
Okay. Present.
There we go. Thank you. And a quick little introduction of staff. We have our CAO, Alana Arthurs. Hello. Acting Clerk Martina Chait-Hartwig. Hello. Interim Treasurer Paul Creamer. Where are you? There you are. Fire Chief Chuck Pedersen. Hello. Manager of Public Works Jake Condon. Good afternoon. Manager Recreation Facilities Mike Mood. And planner Christina Coulter. And librarian CEO is Maggie on?
I don't see her joined yet.
Okay.
Oh, there she is.
Oh, there she is. Hello, Maggie.
Hi.
And of course, as this meeting is around the budget, we may be extra staff might be joining us as we go through the various departmental presentations. So, hey, there it is. With all of council in attendance, I call the meeting to order. So the purpose for this meeting is exclusively around presentation and training and discuss the draft budget. So just to be clear, and I'm sure our treasurer will go over this in great detail, we have a presentation schedule for the budget. This isn't the first and only opportunity that council and the community will have an opportunity to look at it. It's just basically to give us a high level or a deep dive look into the whole budget. So for council, I would encourage you to ask questions, but certainly when it comes to decision making and setting direction, really we're just here to listen to staff and get get some overall direction as to what the budget is looking like, so that we can have more detailed discussions and set some priorities in future meetings. I'll move on to the land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Michi, Sageg, and Ishebeg. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. Do we have any disclosure of pecuniary interest from the members present? Seeing nothing. Could I please ask for a motion to adopt the agenda? Deputy Mayor Nelson, seconded by Councillor Johnston. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you. And here's where we go. We get to turn it over to our interim treasurer, Paul Creamer, for a presentation of our first look at the 2023 budget. So, Paul, I will hand it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. Acting Clerk Martina, may I please share my screen? Oh, I think I already have the ability to. And can someone just confirm that they're seeing my screen?
We can see that, yes.
Awesome. If I can start the slideshow. Okay, so thank you, Council, and any members of the public that are joining today. This is, as Mayor Watson indicated, this is your first glance at our 2023 budget. I have a couple slides, or my next slide, I'll go over something that's kind of important for this. But before I get into anything, I do want to thank all staff, all managers that helped out in getting the budget to this point. I know everyone has their own responsibilities, and getting bugged by me to get them their budget stuff isn't always the top of their priority, just given all the other things that they have to deal with. But so I do appreciate everyone working with me and getting it at least to this point. Okay, so this is, I just want to quickly be clear about what today's objectives, at least my objectives. Anytime I go into a meeting, I want to be clear what my objectives are and some of the expectations of everyone around the table. So my expectation is that you're going to receive the budget and hear about the budget changes that are being proposed and about the projects that are being proposed. So, staff will explain and in their own words. So I know we have an explanation in the budget document, but sometimes it can help hearing it in words as well. If there's any specific questions you have, it's definitely an opportunity now, or to make note of questions that you may have going forward. Direct them to myself or the appropriate manager. But I think actually, if there are questions going forward, if you route everything through me, or at least CC me, then I can kind of track what's being asked and I can make sure that everything's getting answered. Now, I know when I do budgets, there's always one number and one number pretty much only that 95, 98% of people look at, and that's going to be the impact to the budget, the percent change. And so this budget is much higher than I would normally bring to council. It's a little bit of a different budget, different scenario than I've experienced in the past. I think in the past I've been able and been confident to get a budget down to a number that I'm confident in putting in front of council, fully understanding that there still may be changes yet at that point. This year's a little bit different with, we're having this meeting and council hasn't even had a full council meeting, a regular full business meeting yet. And so I really kind of wrestled with this idea that I don't understand and I don't have an idea, and I think managers as well, what council's priorities are, both heading into 2023 and beyond. And so this is not a proposed budget. This is a work in progress budget. This is where, I think typically when I do the process, I work with managers. They kind of give me their wish lists, and we can determine, knowing what council's objectives and priorities are, say, no, this should wait. We should hold off on this, or this isn't needed at all, and we can get that budget down. I think what's different this year is we're bringing you kind of all of the managers' wish lists, and what they are identifying at this point as their ideal budget. Now, there's other things going on that is contributing to the higher increase than normal, and we'll get into all that. And so, given that this is a work in progress, there are still things that I'm going to be working on with staff. So we will do another kind of review, almost line by line, I would say, just in the context of being further along in 2022 and having a better idea of actuals. We're going to review the capital funding, how we're paying for capital projects, and specifically in the context of the use of some development charges. I would say right now, rough number, I could apply about 100,000 of development charges to the budget as it stands, but I think I needed to do some more work. I needed to understand the most recent legislation changes. I needed to understand if and how we can maybe apply these funds to some larger projects. So before I committed them, I wanted to make sure that they can be committed, and I'm comfortable committing those funds to 2023 projects. One thing that is going to be critical in order for council to make some decisions is an updated reserve and reserve fund forecast. And this, if all goes to plan, will include 2020 surplus value and a projected 2021 surplus value. And then the other thing I want to bring to council in the not too distant future, hopefully as part of this budget process, is a capital forecast beyond 2023. I think this is going to be important for context for decisions in the 2023 budget that, if we look at pushing stuff off, you understand what's coming up. Sometimes the challenge with a forecast beyond even the current year is it can be difficult to know exactly what's going to come up. So a challenge can be that it can look light in the future years because you don't know the things that are going to come up. But we're going to at least do high level forecast beyond 2023. So even though this is not a final budget, any input council can provide staff before the next meeting. That'll allow us staff to shape the budget to align with council's objectives. Another little change is the presentation you're going to see today is pretty much the budget document. In past years, I have done a dedicated set of slides, but I think the way that I structure the document, I really try and make the report readable for the public and council, that it's easy to digest, and it seemed a little bit like a duplicative effort. So we'll see how that goes this year, and it's always a work in progress. So we're going to start. I'm going to keep doing the majority of the talking for the first little bit of the presentation and really just give you an overview of everything to do with the budget, but at a high level. And then the next part of the budget will be each manager presenting, kind of giving you an idea of their departmental responsibilities, but knowing that we just did a ton of council training and they've already gone into detail about what each department does. So that'll be high level stuff, but I do think it's important for context when we're talking about budget. I don't want to focus on only the changes and, whatever percent that may be, but also realize the other part of the budget that, is still in this discussion and the things that we are getting done with the money that is being spent. I think it's important to look back to the things that we've accomplished in the past year with the budget that was provided to staff. So each manager will give an overview of their accomplishments over the past year. And then some high-level discussion on the changes and just kind of highlights of their operating budget, and an overview of all the capital projects being recommended. Okay, so where we're at right now, December 6th, budget meeting number 1, where we're heading. And these are going to be some new dates for council. We've tried to come up with a schedule that I think fits with timeline to allow for some input going forward, to make any necessary changes, but also get it adopted at a reasonable time in the year. So we're recommending January 17th at 5 p.m. We will hold budget meeting number 2. What we're proposing is that 5 p.m. will be the actual public meeting. I will give a similar presentation probably to the first half of this budget to the public. I'll also summarize any changes that have been made since then. And then at the council meeting, I will provide any additional information I have, and we can get into any discussion. The council meeting that immediately follows that public meeting. For February 7th, again, I'll provide an updated draft, and I think that's where we can expect kind of that final budget deliberation to happen. And at February 21st, I'm proposing budget adoption if all goes to plan, but that date, it can be a little bit of a moving target depending on things that come up. Okay, so very high level. If I had, let's say, a minute to explain this year's budget, I think there's two or three big things that are kind of happening. So number one is inflation. We're seeing an increase in interest rates from the Bank of Canada. We're also seeing, just from CPI alone, it increased 6.9%. And the other important inflationary index that I think is important to remember for the township is the non-residential construction price index. That's increased 25.9% in the Toronto area. And we do, on average, 2, 3, 4 million worth of capital projects, including our roads, in a year. And so anytime we see price increases, we're going to feel it, and we're going to be able to do less with the same amount of money. And then the other kind of big piece of this budget is that we have some significant capital needs and or purchases, however you want to call it, along with an aging infrastructure. So we know this project's been on the books for a while. It was approved in 2022. There were some kind of delays with construction, or I wouldn't even call them delays. These things take time. But by the time we got an updated cost estimate, it increased from about 7.5 million to 12 million in total cost. And that means the debenture costs, along with the increasing interest rates, went from 475,000 projected to right now I'm forecasting 915,000. And so, that's almost a doubling in that debenture payment over the course of a few years. Upcoming in 2023, there was a previously committed gravel pit purchase. And where I think one of my gaps and one of my areas that I want to be more confident in going into future budgets is really understanding our longer term capital needs. We are in the final stages of our asset management plan that will be presented to council in 2023. And I think just more work needs to be done on understanding that. And that's going to be a part of, this process going forward in 2023, but it'll also be a big part. We may not be able to fully understand our situation going forward as part of this budget, but it will be a key focus for me in 2023 going into 2024 budget and future budgets. So this slide is going to just really summarize where the changes are at in terms of an impact to the levy. So overall, the net operating levy is changing 8.5%, but which means a 6.4% impact to the levy. Capital is changing 30%, which means a 7% to the levy. We also, which was committed to last year, an ongoing capital levy for the joint building at 1.18%. So that brings the total levy change to 14.5%, but we actually did see some, for us, strong assessment growth in 2022 at 1.2%, and so we're sitting at 13.27%. What that means for taxes in our township, so the residential impact per 100,000 of assessment would be $58 a year or $4.87 a month. And the impact on the median property of 256,000 is $149 annually and $12.46 a month. Couple of things I just want to touch on. I do think it's important. I always think of costs monthly, so I like to show that number. I think it's a cost that resonates with me. That's how I think of when I think of spending. So I like to show that number. The median property of 256,000, we have to remember that that's 2016 assessment. There has not been a reassessment since then, so those are 2016 values. I just want to be clear on that, because if we probably look on realtor.ca or any real estate site, you probably aren't seeing many houses for that value right now. And so the assessment will be updated. We don't have a final timeline at this point, but that is the median property within the township from an assessment perspective. Okay, so how do we kind of this slide's going to focus on the key operating changes. So if I just go back, we're at the 6.41% levy impact. So how do we get there? These are the major items that are impacting that number. So first is the salary and wage cost of living adjustment. So as part of the employee compensation agreement, council approves a salary grid increase as per the annual OMERS pension inflation index. So OMERS uses the average of the CPI for the 12-month period ending in October and compares it to the average for the same period the previous year. So essentially this year, it's 6%. I think, I showed on the previous slide, CPI is at 6.9%, but OMERS does cap at 6%. Any variance between what CPI is and that 6% does get carried over. And so we don't know what, how that'll impact going forward. But we do see a 6% for 2023. Insurance costs have gone up, and they've gone up the last 2 years. One thing I will note, when we're doing our line by lines, it's twofold. We're trying to reflect what things are actually going to cost, and we're reviewing sometimes we don't always get the budget right the previous year. And so this change is twofold. It's to reflect the increase in cost, but it's also, there was an under budget. We did under budget by, not on purpose in 2022. So the impact is greater than what it would have been, but that is part of the budgeting process to ensure that we are actually capturing everything correctly. Fuel costs were, I think everyone sees this at the pumps. We are forecasting an additional 15,000 in cost just due to price increases. For fire, the paging costs, I don't want to get into this too much, and I will leave this to Chuck, but due to a potential change in providers, there's a cost being forecasted for 34,800. Various materials changes or increases, both due to volume and price in public works. So that's salt, sand, and calcium for dust control are contributing a $63,000 increase. I did receive the 2023 levy for the OPP, and one of my tasks going forward in this budget is, this came in somewhat recently, so I haven't had time to really dive in and understand this change, but at the same time, I don't know how much I want to question it because it is going down 20,000. This last number, I think I can refine a little bit more. These are kind of the general ins and outs and changes as we do the line by line. Is 72,000. I think I can refine a little bit more, but as doing this chart the first time through, there was nothing else that really majorly stood out. So when we look at staffing changes, I'll go through each one, and I think it's best if I just speak to each one. So going forward, we will be obligated to provide OMERS enrollment, or at least the option to enroll for all part-time staff. So, we don't know at this point who will and will not enroll, and we probably won't know every year going in if, let's say new summer students or new contract employees will or will not. But the forecast at this point for that impact is a little over 26,000. approved by council in 2022 was to switch IT providers, or change from microwage to more of an in-house IT analyst that is going to be shared with another municipality. And the impact of that after we reduce some of the contracted services costs for our current provider ends up being about 28,000. Now, I do think that this will result in quite a few future efficiencies that we can now do, because we'll have the expertise in-house to implement different IT solutions, and it'll make, I think, better efficiencies in-house by providing the same service. Just wanted to be clear here on this next one that it is a change in kind of complement, and it is a change to the way we operate, but the financial impact is minimal. That we are changing from doing a third party for grass cutting to hiring a student to complete that, or a summer laborer, I should say. Another change was to change one part-time or seasonal operator to full-time. And this is in order to accommodate the additional plowing of the township facilities. And so that change costs us, the township, a little under 6,000. During 2022, the township completed and approved a compensation review that ensured township wages continue to be at market levels. So I think this is an important exercise to ensure that we're at competitive rates, and especially considering the current state of the labor market. And so this change costed the township 33,000. We are forecasting some employee gapping. This just means some positions that are not, that will not have the person in the role during the year, and that's the impact of that position, or that gapping, I should say. So where do we go from here? And so I just want to have a kind of a discussion around what some options are. Really, so I've told you what the numbers are at a very high level, and so what can we do from here? So, so we can use reserve and reserve funds to fund various capital projects. So, and that's kind of the strategy I've used in previous years, is to use a previous surplus to fund and kind of move that into reserves. And I didn't use anything beyond that surplus for capital projects. The issue is that is not necessarily a sustainable approach. We don't always know what these surpluses are going to be. There may be years without a surplus. And so I think we do need to be careful going forward to rely on that approach. I think going forward, we need to ensure that our capital replacement needs are being met, and we're contributing the right amount of money into capital on an annual basis. The other challenge is that in 2023, there are going to be substantial reserve withdrawals for both the gravel pit purchase and the joint building. Okay, so what's another thing that council can do? Delay capital projects. So, if council looks at the list and says, and probably working hand in hand with the managers, but says, let's not do that this project in 2023, let's push it off to 2024. I can say that the early findings of the asset management plan indicate that there's a pretty big shortfall in funding of the township's assets. So, anytime we push back any maintenance or capital projects, it's just kind of pushing it off into a future year where there's already going to be a set list of projects that will need to be completed. And then the third one will be to increase taxes. And so I think if taxes are increased, I think there's an assumption, or at least they would be increased on the basis that our taxes are not sufficient to meet the service levels that are expected by the public, and to be sustainable going forward. I have provided some comparisons coming up of how we compare to other townships, and I will get into that. But you know, the challenge of this is that, you know, in a high interest or high inflation market, you know, everyone is experiencing cost increases, and additional property taxes only add to that burden. I'm very aware of that, and I think, you know, I think council will be as well. And so it's you know, we're experiencing the cost increases to operate. But so is everyone out in the public. And so we're going to have to find probably a balance of that going forward. And again, this is a first draft. I am going to continue to, you know, find ways, and I'm going to make recommendations if I find anything to bring this number down and to find cost savings. But this is just where we're at today. All right. So I did a operating summary. This is a capital funding summary, just showing how things are paid this year versus last year. It does show that we are doing more in capital. Now, the big driver of that is the gravel pit purchase. Okay. Just going to take a little drink of water here. So we head into this year, or we headed into last year with an approval from council to complete a new joint public works and fire hall building. Now, that was going to be pending approval of the final design and costs once we actually went to procurement. And so during 2022, progress was made on the design of the building. However, there were some pending issues with the property that we needed to resolve before we could proceed to the final design stage. During the redesign work, the consultant estimated that the cost would be closer to 12 million, based on, and this is based on recent similar projects that other municipalities have completed, kind of on a, you know, what did that project cost them on a per square foot basis? And so what is this project forecasted to cost us on a per square foot basis? Heading into the year, I was confident in proposing this financing plan. I felt that it would mitigate the tax increase felt by the residents. You know, they wouldn't feel it all at once. So the proposal was to use basically $1 million of reserves and to use those reserves to offset the amount of levy that we have to pay for the debenture each year. So really this resulted in a 1.18% increase each year going forward to 2028. So it was a long-term commitment, but it was a plan that, you know, the residents wouldn't feel this big rush or this big jump due to this building. Okay, so now moving forward, as I alluded to, costs have gone up and interest rates have gone up. So the most recent, as of last week, from Infrastructure Ontario, the rate for a 20-year debenture would be 4.4%. This is actually a pretty decent rate that we get compared to being, you know, in the residential market. We're probably considered pretty low risk borrowers, so we get a half decent rate, but it's still, you know, almost 2 full percent higher. And we're any day now, I can't recall if it's today or this week, where a potential another increase is coming. So under the same assumption that, you know, we have about $1 million that could comfortably contribute to this project, we have kind of, I just wanted to show two options. I know one option would be probably more favorable right off the bat, but I did want to show, you know, couple of different scenarios here. So we would maintain the existing plan until of 1.18% until the basically $1 million of reserves runs out. And so under that plan, this would now mean in 2025, we need a 6.86% increase just to accommodate the debenture payments, and 2026 would be just under 5%. Now option 2 smooths out and kind of levels it out starting sooner, starting in 2024, and we end up with a 3 3/4 increase starting in 2024 for the next 3 years. So these are just some high-level scenarios just to give council an idea where things are at the moment. You know, there's definitely strategies that we can continue to look at to reduce costs in design and even some financing strategies, whether we start with a financing or construction loan and we hope interest rates come down. It's a risk, but I've spoken with some other municipalities. They've kind of hedged a little bit on some of their financing strategies. So they take half of the debenture up front, so they lock into that rate, and then maybe half once construction is complete. And you're kind of hoping that the rate goes down, but you have 2 debentures at 2 different rates. These are options we can continue to investigate as we go forward. So where have we been in terms of historical property tax increases? These figures, how I'm arriving at them is we have the median property in the township. And I took that property and basically went back specifically to that property and looked at the exact amount of taxes. So these values may change slightly based on how your property kind of changed based on your assessment phase in over this same period. And so what do we see? We see that over this time since 2016, that the average increase was 3.4% for the township share and 2.4% for the total tax bill. And so that's the total amount that this house was paying, including the county and education taxes. Just for reference, CPI over the same time frame increased on average 3%. Okay, so how do we compare? This is can be a difficult exercise to draw meaning from. Anytime you start to get into comparing yourself to other townships, there's a lot of context that needs to be provided in terms of the service levels being provided, services being provided in general. But I think it does at least give you an idea of, the average family living in the average or median house in our township and surrounding townships, what are they paying in taxes? The other thing to note when we're doing property tax comparisons like this is the composition of our property taxes varies quite a bit. So one of our challenges is that we do not have a lot of hardly any commercial assessment or non-residential assessment. And that can be a challenge because typically non-residential helps offset for the residential sector. They pay at a higher rate and they don't demand the same level of services. Sometimes they can be a little bit more demanding on your water or roads, but in general, they aren't using the same rec services at the same level as a residential home. So when I look at the median household in each township in 2022, that number for Douro is $983. And, you know, there's a pretty big range here in terms of what we're looking at compared to other townships. The other piece to look at is our median assessment is higher than some other townships. And so our share of our county taxes is going to be a little bit higher because the same rate is applied cross county wide. So our median house of 256,000 is going to pay more than the median house in Havelock. So when we do look at the total tax bill, there is some things to consider, some considerations there in this analysis. But it does provide context. It does provide a picture of where we are at for our taxes comparatively. So with that, at this point in time, I am going to open it up for questions before I hand it off. If there's any high-level questions that you need answered before I hand it off to managers, but please note that managers are going to go into more specific detail. But on anything I've shown here, I think it's probably good before we get too far away from it.
Great, thanks for that, Paul. Probably gives you a chance to catch your breath and have a sip of water as well. Any questions from the members of council on what we've seen so far? Keeping in mind, of course, there's much more to come. Other than a barking dog in the background who has a lot of questions, it looks like we're just absorbing the information, Paul. So
Okay.
Back at you.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Just to know, it has been pointed out to me that there's a couple things on this org chart that do need updated, that will get updated in the updated version of this document. Okay, we're going to start with our CAO, Alana Arthurs, who's going to walk you through corporate services.
Thanks, Paul. Oh, we're there. You can go to the next one. You're going to have control, right? Okay, I'll just give a really high overview. I know some of this will be a refresher for some and new to others. So if you have any questions, I'll try to identify, as opposed to Martina and Paul and I all bouncing back and forth. I'll identify everything in the corporate services department. So if there's anything that any questions you have that I can answer, I'm happy to do that. Otherwise, we'll pull Martina and or Paul in for anything specific related to their departments. So since my arrival in the CAO department, we definitely have gone through a lot of our policy and program development, our policies, our HR policies, which we reviewed last year, some policies also in conjunction with Martina related to that are attached to bylaws, trying to clean up some of the outdated procedures and that sort of thing that were occurring here. Our human resources, we did do our job evaluation and we did our job descriptions. So we did a little bit of realignment, which is identified a little bit better, I think, in that org chart. I know you did receive it during our council orientation. So you have seen it once, we can come back with it again, but we did do a little bit of realignment with those job descriptions. And we had the administration dedicated specifically to certain departments. Prior to that, everybody was sort of doing a little bit of everything. There was a lot of cross training happening, which has been very beneficial. Now, as well as during COVID, when we had some skeleton staff, but it did provide some gaps for our management who were unable to get some of the administrative things done that needed to be done. So we tried to realign some of those specific tasks with our administration so that the managers do have some support. So we went through that with the job descriptions and job evaluation. The pay equity review we have not completed as of yet, but it is in the budget for next year. And that will conclude that whole project, which was sort of a completed project. We just piecemealed it a little bit. The performance management was a little bit behind. We tried to catch up. We were also a little bit late getting through it last year, or getting through 2021. We did change the procedure a little bit. I'm not sure I'm still totally happy with it. So we'll look at it again as we move forward for 2022. The job or the performance management process that was completed for my role was also slightly different. So just looking at some of the options that are out there, we're trying to find the most effective way to move forward with that, but I think we're in pretty good shape as far as timing. Economic and community development activities. Since bringing Leisha on board with the building department, she has been taking on some of those economic development responsibilities and participating in some of those groups that are countywide with a variety of municipalities that are involved with representation. Certainly something that we can continue to build on, especially as COVID is lifting, hopefully, and we have more opportunities. So something we'll certainly look for moving forward. Again, continuing to develop some of our programs. I think there's a lot of processes and things that we could do better. A lot of them do relate back to our financial systems and our technology. So we'll continue to work through those just to try to find some efficiencies. Efficiencies certainly in-house that make things a little bit easier for our staff, as well as make it better for the public to access information and just try to have some cost savings along the way. Advocating for the township with all elected officials and different levels of government. You know, we continue to try to build those relationships. Again, something that we'll continue to do over the next term of council with a new council in place. For myself being in this role, I think, you know, I've developed a very good relationship with our neighboring municipalities and certainly our other levels of government, but we can continue to build on those relationships and hopefully have some opportunities where funding is available to leverage those relationships to help us along. And strategic planning, we certainly are looking forward to completing a new strategic plan in the new year. I think upon my arrival, we had our service delivery review, which was most helpful. And as we continue to work through that, I think it's time to move into that strategic plan. Again, as COVID is lifting, hopefully there'll be some new opportunities and with a new council and also some new staff and changes here. I think it's a great time for all of us to come together and try to take a look at the next, at the minimum 4 years, but potentially beyond that and how we want the municipality to move forward. So moving on to the clerk's department, I think a lot of this too is sort of repetitive based on the training that you did have, but obviously our clerk and her staff is responsible for all of your council and committee agendas, minutes, and correspondence, bylaws, and statutory public notices, which often happen in the clerk's department as well as in the planning department. So they'll work closely together to ensure that those timelines are met. As we move forward, if there are questions, certainly reach out to the clerk's department with regard to any of those. Also with our electronic agenda management system with eScribe, if there's questions or challenges, Martine is happy to help. Act as a resource. So again, with that meeting management, the procedural bylaw, I believe everybody has had an opportunity to see that. So again, if you have questions regarding that, generally that gives you some guidance on how our meetings are facilitated. So if there's any questions or issues during the meeting, we'll refer back to that. And certainly any issues around accountability, transparency, and governance. There's been plenty of legislation that has come forward from the provincial government over the last few years that has given us some guidance and expectations for policies around those types of things. So we continue to be compliant and have policies related to those. And if there's questions, please reach out to the clerk's department. Acting as a head for the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Those are those FOI requests that we receive. Hopefully we don't get too many of them. Again, we'll try to put information out there and make it available. So sometimes I think municipalities have been looked at as withholding information. And, you know, I've tried to say to the staff, if there's anything that is open to the public, it's better that we just have it on the website. Don't make people ask for it, make it accessible, make them, make it easily, it's easy to find, whether it's through the website or just a phone call. So it eliminates those FOI requests. So they can be somewhat daunting. And then there's also a reporting that has to be done at the end of the year. And managing our records retention bylaw, there's certainly some work we have to do to be able to get there. And part of that is digitizing some of our records. Once we get through that process and we have some of that updated, it'll make it that much easier for us to be able to provide that information on our website and easier for the public to access, as well as staff. The township policy manual, again, that's just going back to all of our policies. So there's a variety of policies built in there and how we govern our day-to-day operations. And sometimes those get outdated. So we're constantly, you know, trying to be proactive. And oftentimes we stumble across one that's, you know, we notice it's updated and we'll bring those to council as required. We also did pass a policy on policies last year, which identifies what policies come to council and which ones we can address internally. So for the new council members, if you're interested in seeing that, we're happy to share that just so you have an understanding if there's something that hasn't come to council, why it is, and how those are defined. Lottery licenses with the assistance of the finance department. Again, that's just something that's for the public to come in. If they need lottery licenses, the clerk's department generally will handle that. And of course, the municipal election, which thankfully for Martina is over for another almost 4 years. In the next slide, Paul. And finance. So obviously, you know, our finance department is responsible for all of our financial reporting and record keeping, maintaining the tangible capital assets, implementing the asset management plan. You know, I know that that we've been playing some catch up in the finance department, and Paul's been really working hard to get us there. And you know, things like the budget sometimes take precedence, and some of those things take a backseat for a little bit. But we're certainly making progress and trying to work through them. The creation and monitoring of the budget. Again, Paul's worked through some of these challenges that we've had in making these documents accessible for the managers. There's often been questions, you know, I don't know where I'm at. I don't know, you know, where my budget's at. So Paul's really worked hard to try to give us the access to our own budgets so that they're updated and our management is aware of where they're at. Processing all accounts payable and receivable, processing payroll, acting as a benefits administrator, employee benefits and OMERS. Again, with some of that realignment and the addition of Nicole, she has taken on that payroll position and is also handling the benefits administration. Some of that is a lot to learn, so they're working through that from the finance department. Managing the grant process, hopefully we will see lots of opportunities. I know, you know, sometimes I get updated. I know Paul has an organization that updates him as well. And we will certainly, especially once we get through our strategic plan and we have some direction of council, look for any opportunity that we can leverage some of that funding. Annual audit process. Obviously, we have our auditors who come in and conduct our audits annually, and they will provide their findings to council. And managing all of the tax collection, including delinquent accounts and the tax sale process. Are there any questions about the departments before I go on?
Council, anything of our CAO as of yet? Seeing nothing, carry on, Elena.
Okay. So again, through 2022, we did do that compensation review. So that was actually completed throughout the county. All of the lower tier municipalities participated and had one consultant that came in and took a look at all of the municipalities and where our salaries fell. I will tell you that our salaries were certainly at least slightly below most of the other municipalities. So that's where Paul identified that there was a cost to the municipality last year. And that was really just to try to bring our staff up to the level that that was comparable to other municipalities. We also reviewed that compensation agreement bylaw. When I first arrived, I think we quickly went through it, and over the last year, we took a little more time to really dive into it and try to perfect some of the areas that needed updating and bring that back to council so that hopefully we have that now for your term of council along with your remuneration bylaw. We don't need to bring those back unless there's a reason to do so. The job evaluation being conducted currently, and that certainly is in preparation for our pay equity review for next year. Successful recruitment of newly created and improved positions. So currently, yes, we have a full complement, which makes me happy because it was a long time from my arrival where we did not have that full complement. So based on what I saw when I arrived, as well as the service delivery review, where we had some gaps and recommendations and approvals of council, we were able to fill all of those roles. So we currently do have one posting out there right now. It is just a contract position in the building department. But I would say right now, I do feel like we have a full complement for the most part. New technology, we had some funding that came in from the provincial government that we allocated to some new laptops, new cell phones. Again, when I arrived, there were some old flip phones that were dead in glove compartments and desks that weren't being used. So we upgraded some of that technology so that staff had the access to it, as well as just making it a little bit easier to communicate. Our new HR policy manual, which I mentioned, it is quite an extensive document. If anybody would like to take a look at it, I'm happy to share it, but it is quite lengthy. We worked in consultation with SHRP who has been our HR consultant. So we're content that we're up to date and we're compliant with all the legislation right now. And if anything does come up, they're very good to advise us that, you know, we need this new policy. Most recently, we had the right to disconnect policy, which essentially just says that, you know, we can't ask staff to work beyond their normal working hours. So they were kind enough to prepare that policy for us and let us know that it needed to be done, and we were able to ensure that we were compliant with that legislation. Thank you. Again, I think I touched on the new performance evaluation, and we will continue to try to perfect that. You know, I think it's one of those things that people always talk about. It's a bit of an onerous task, and, you know, is it the right way to really evaluate someone's performance, to take a look at that annually? And I'm not sure I have all those answers just yet, but I certainly will continue to investigate what I think is the best option so that we can ensure that we're doing some kind of performance evaluation for our staff. Facilitating council training. I think, you know, we've gone through that over the last couple of weeks. I'm sure you're all inundated with lots of information, and I'm sure there will be more to come, even as we go through council meetings. Once you settle in and there's additional things that maybe need to come to the forefront, we'll try to make sure that we keep everybody updated and trained on anything that needs to be, any information that you need to have. Payroll procedures were reviewed and modernized, and I know that Paul is still continuing to work on that for the upcoming year, and implemented e-billing for property taxes. So for 2023, you know, we're continuing to look at, I wouldn't say gaps in our staffing, but just, you know, changes that have occurred since, again, my arrival, and how that's going to impact the next year. The COVID pandemic, hopefully we are seeing those restrictions removed. Things look positive right now, and hopefully we're moving in that direction where, you know, we don't have to worry about the shutdowns and, you know, the skeleton staff. You know, it did allow, I think, for some opportunities to create that work from home environment. And for some of our staff, you know, we have one that is not feeling well today, but well enough to work and is able to work from home. And I think we have to, as an employer, be open to that and provide that opportunity. But I think also, you know, we realize the advantage of having that. So that person is not out for the entire day, but they are able to still contribute even from a remote standpoint. And additional funds, again, just speaking to our strategic plan and providing that direction for staff from council. So future budget considerations, using that service delivery review and subsequent recommendations as a guide. Definitely plenty of efficiencies to be explored. I think once we come back in January, which we will, with an overview of that service delivery review and where we're at, I think you'll see that there has been quite a lot that has been accomplished. Staff have done a really great job in moving through some of those recommendations, and we'll be able to show that to council, and another just opportunity to evaluate what's important and where this council would like to go if there's something that we haven't touched that we should have. But again, just giving you the opportunity to see how far we've come. So just a quick overview of the capital projects. Not much for the corporate services department, the pay equity review. Again, I think we've spoken about it already. It's the final component. We're budgeting $10,000 for that. The development charges study, $30,000 for that, and $20,000 for a strategic plan. We're hoping that we can get that done fairly cost effectively. We'll be sending out some requests for quotations on that, so we can get something back in an expedient manner so we can work on it early in 2023. And that's it for me.
Thank you for that, Alana. I think we're just going to pause and do some questions. I see Councillor Watt, your hand is up. The floor is yours, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. I did send in a question there yesterday, and I got an answer on it, and I'm not quite 100% sure that I quite understand what's going on. And it's Bill 23 that's out, and I've kind of glanced over it somewhat, not big time, but it's talking about some of the changes with the housing and reducing or even eliminating these charges for development. And I don't know whether that's something's come down the tube of that. And my question was like, why spend $30,000 on a study on it if we're going to lose them or lose most of them? That's kind of where I was at it, but I don't know where that's sitting right now. So, but for the benefit of other council, that was a question that I had sent in.
Alana, can you comment on that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm going to give it to Paul. I was just going to say, that's a Paul question. That's perfect.
Through your worship to Councillor Watt, just to clarify, there are changes, but there won't be such significant changes that it won't be worth having a charge. A lot of the changes, a lot of times, are to, in these types of reviews, are to services that larger cities have. I find typically these reviews are around transit, housing, or social housing. Yeah, like those are the big things that kind of get picked on by the development community. And so, yeah, there's going to be some changes, such as, any increase or change that we have to phase in. But that's something that the township did last time as well. And the option has always been there to not charge the full amount of your calculated charge. So going forward, if there is an increase calculated, we can't charge that immediately. We have to phase that in over 4 years. Now, for some municipalities, that can be significant and a significant amount of revenue lost in that scenario. I don't think it's going to be to the point that it's not worth doing a study. Now, in terms of the study costs, those are no longer going to be eligible. However, we completed our study and bylaw under the previous legislation, which enabled studies to be completed. So we will be operating under our old bylaw. If anything changes, in previous changes to the legislation, I have seen where the transition allows you to continue to operate how you passed your bylaw or how you completed your study. If that is not the case, I will bring something back to council and we'll have to find another funding source. But currently that study is being funded through development charges.
Thank you, Paul. And I think Councillor Watt, just to perhaps, I don't want to say satisfy any concerns around Bill 23 as it relates to development charges. It's my understanding, and it's still new that everybody's still trying to wrap their heads around it, but it's my understanding that the development charges being waived really only applies to R1 zoned development for secondary and tertiary units.
Yep. And
in Douro-Dummer Township, we don't have any R1 zone where there would be sewer and water, for example. So people who are still putting in perhaps a secondary suite would still be required under the new changes. But I think it's still so new. Everybody's trying to get a handle on what it means.
Through you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate that, and that's why I kind of put in there. Maybe I'm out left field on that. That's what I said to Paul anyway in Atlanta. But it's just one of those things that you try and breeze over it. Not getting into detail. But I thought, if it is the case, it's one of these days real soon we may not be able to have development charges of any kind. That was kind of where I was at with this. I want to make sure we're not going to spend out money for something that we're not even going to be able to collect in the future. So I appreciate the answers and thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from council at this point before we looks like we're moving on to Public Works after? Okay, seeing nothing, I'll hand it back over to Paul and Jake.
Yeah, so with that, I will hand it over to Jake. I do think what we can do is after each manager has presented, we can open the floor for questions. I think that's an appropriate time and relevant to while the manager is there to speak. But obviously, if anything comes up at the end, we can still get that answered for you. I will leave it up to the managers if they have the ability to stay. Feel free. After I know Alana's going to stay, but the manager's coming up. If you present and have another pressing issue, I know we also have a meeting this evening. So with that, I will hand it over to Jake Conan, our manager of Public Works.
Thanks, Paul, and through you, your worship. I won't, as Paul mentioned, we have discussed kind of the department's responsibility in the past, but I'll just give you a kind of a high level. The Public Works Department oversees and facilitates the maintenance and capital activities for 520 lane kilometers of roadway, bridges, and culverts. The department is also responsible for the township gravel resources, the travel transfer station, curbside waste collection contract, and the closed landfill sites. You can go to the next slide, Paul. Next one. So some of the 2022 accomplishments for the department is we continue to make improvements to the public works fleet, including the replacement of end of life pieces of equipment and the addition of some new pieces of equipment, including the pickup truck that will be used for our additional snow plowing, as well as be used in the off season for the Parks and Rec department. We applied approximately 6 kilometers of surface treatment in 2022. 5 kilometers of double surface treatment, unfortunately, had to be delayed till 2023. Approximately 24 kilometers of gravel was applied to our roads. We brushed 38 kilometers of roadsides and accomplished 15 kilometers of ditch clearing along our roads. Some of the major projects we completed were the Cooper Road project, Bradfield Road, and Payne Line Road. As I mentioned, the final surface will be applied to these in 2023. Working alongside our fire chief, Chuck, and myself, we worked together to decommission the Douro fueling station, and we did a complete replacement of the Warsaw fuel system at the public works yard. We did have an additional staff member added this year, which is to be used for the removal of the outside snowplow contracts. So we're now performing all the snow or winter maintenance by township staff, providing cost savings and improving the efficiencies to these duties. We also had a major storm that ran through the area in early spring, which delayed some of our projects from being started. It took the department approximately a month to clean up after that storm. It was extensive cleanup. We did hire a couple of local contractors to help out with that cleanup, and yeah, it was a large cleanup and took a lot of time out of the department. Some of our 2023 capital comments. The proposed work is based on previous council decisions, previous roads needed study, as well as our 10-year gravel and hard topping projections. The roads need study will also influence the direction of any future capital programs. We're continuing with our brushing and ditch clearing program. We see great improvements to our road system when this is completed, specifically in the springtime when the spring runoff is coming. We'll continue to replace and add to the fleet. In 2023, we have our rubber-tired excavator, brushing additional brushing unit, and a snowblower for the parks tractor to be used to assist with the snow removal of our sidewalk and municipal properties. It's not so new anymore, but there is a provincial soil regulation pertaining to the placement and removal of fill. This comes into complete effect in January of 2023. This may have budget implications for the township projects and maintenance activities in the future, mostly due to additional costs to have these locations tested, and then if required, additional testing to see where it can be removed or where it can be placed. The following table outlines some of the road rehab for 2022 to 2023. We're proposing approximately 23 kilometers of brushing, 12 kilometers of ditching, 39 kilometers of gravel resurfacing, and 9.5 kilometers of surface treatment. Go to the next slide. Continuing on with the 2023 budget, the conversion, as I had mentioned, of a seasonal equipment operator to a full-time operator. This is to complete the winter maintenance to the municipal properties. This will improve the service as well as make efficiencies and provide longer-term cost savings from no longer having contracted this service. There is an increase in the material costs, specifically the calcium chloride, the sand salt, surface treatment, our fuel. It's a widespread. I'm sure everybody's aware of all the increases to materials. So I can give you a little bit of, for our calcium in 2019 was the last contract. We were paying 25 cents a liter for calcium. In 2022, we're now paying 27 cents, which isn't a great jump. However, they have put a 11-cent fuel surcharge on that as well. So that's overall is 38 cents a liter now compared to 25 cents. Our winter sand in 2019 was $10.85 per ton. We're now looking in 2022 at $14.10 per ton. As Paul had mentioned, our fuel, 13% increase for our gas and a 51% increase in diesel. Our surface treatment as well has gone up from $275 for a single in 2021 to $408 last year. For our double surface treatment, it was $560 in 2021 and $85. They're predicting a minimum of a 10% increase for next year for the surface treatment prices. So our future budget considerations, the 2024 and projected replacement of capital equipment should be considered. We have a tractor mounted sweeper coming up, a pickup truck, and 2 tandem snowplow trucks. You know, to continue to make these improvements to the equipment and vehicles in the department will reduce repair costs and downtime. As I mentioned, our increasing fuel and material costs, our future capital road programs. We do have some large projects coming up, roads that have deteriorated beyond repair and now are due for a complete overhaul. And some of these roads are long sections of roads, so it is going to be a large capital item. As mentioned previously, the provincial soil regulations that will, depending on the road, depending on how much ditching is required, will have some impact on our budget. The new Public Works Fire and Fire Hall facility, it's a significant project, as Paul mentioned. However, will provide a central hub for the 2 departments. The current buildings have some health and safety concerns as well as space challenges. And just to complete, the asset management plan will provide additional detail in the future or in future asset replacement needs as well. Next slide. So just to hit some of the high level capital projects, the gravel pit purchase. This was a previous agreement purchase and sale by the previous council. with a completion date of December 30th, 2023. Staff have been working on the various conditions of the agreement, and we'll have more info in the near future for council. We have a brushing unit. This is a new piece of equipment I'm proposing. We did budget some money last year in last year's budget to put in a reserve for this unit. It's more to deal with the roadside brushing, but it's to maintain the roads that we've already did an extensive brushing on, and it's a lighter duty piece of equipment. But the roads have the extensive brushing done. They're easier to maintain with the lighter piece of equipment. As mentioned earlier, the snow blower for the parks tractor. This will help us with the winter maintenance to the school sidewalk, as well as some of our municipal facilities. We run into some roadblocks with that school sidewalk, as it is along a county road, and every time the county goes along, they fill that sidewalk back in, and as the snow gets heavier and wetter, it's harder to remove with our snowplow on the front of the truck as it is now. We can't get up onto the sidewalk. With this snow blower, we'd be able to travel on the sidewalk and be able to blow it right off the edge of the sidewalk. And our rubber tired excavator, this is used, it's a vital piece of equipment for the department. It's used for ditching, our capital projects, our brushing. There is a brushing unit that goes on, a brush head that goes on it to complete our brushing, as well as any culvert repairs or installs. This piece of equipment is due for replacement. It's approaching 8,500 hours. So replacing this now will reduce any large repair costs we have in the future. And I believe that's it for me. If there's any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Thank you very much, Council. Any questions of Mr. Condon?
I got one question.
Go ahead.
That 5 kilowatt of double service treatment that wasn't done last year, and you got in for this year, has that been paid for last year? And we got money set aside for that? That we didn't, you seen we didn't do it? Is it still set aside?
Yeah, that's correct. It's already been approved in last year's budget, and that will carry over to this to next year.
So we don't have to allow that in the budget?
No.
Okay.
Any other questions from Council?
Well, I guess that gravel pit, I need some more further knowledge on what that is and where it is and everything else. So I'll leave that for another question down the road. And the same as the building, the building that the proposed to Public Works and the Fire Department. I once again would like to see plans on that, and which I'm sure we'll do it down the road. But there's a lot of questions I have on that, but I don't think it's appropriate time right now to go over that.
No, that's fair. And thank you, Councillor Johnston. As Mr. Kremer mentioned earlier, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves by seeing this now and not really as a council having an opportunity to even have a full business meeting as of yet. So that information I'm certain will be forthcoming before we make any significant decisions here. Councillor Watt?
Yes, thank you through you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question, Jake. The 700 and change last year for service treatment, next year is 600 and some thousand. Is the 700 and something thousand including what we put off, and is the 600,000 new stuff, or is it including what we have had to forward?
Yeah, so as Councillor Johnson had questioned, the 700,000 from 2022 is already approved in the 2022 budget. So the 600,000 is all new additional work.
Oh,
Through your worship, part of future information will be a list of carry forward projects. Just without this year being complete, it wasn't necessarily appropriate to bring that full list forward yet. So the next time we meet on the budget, we will know which projects were not completed or delivered, and we'll have a list of anything that's being carried forward, and those carry forwards will get put into the appropriate reserve, and those funds will be used from the reserve when that project actually occurs.
Right, thank you. And I believe the carry forwards are funded and still quoted at the prior year's pricing. That's correct?
Correct. And then if there is an adjustment that's required, we have done it with other projects in the past where there is a carry forward but additional funds required, we would put it into the budget. And or we will come to council with a report when we actually do get the cost if it ends up being more than what was budgeted.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? I have just one on the other slide, the rubber tired excavator with the brush head. Has there, and I think I saw this on another page, I apologize, I don't have the full budget document in front of me. Was part of that already funded, like with reserves set aside for that, or how is that $500,000 being proposed to be funded currently?
Jake, I can take this one. So the $500,000 that is funded through the levy at the current time.
Okay, thank you. So assuming that we're done with Public Works, are we going back over to you, Paul, to introduce our next?
If
section?
Questions are all done, I will hand it over to the next lucky contestant.
Great, thank you.
And that is going to be Chuck Pedersen, our fire chief.
Thank you, Paul. I feel lucky already. I'll go to the next slide, please, and present our fire emergency budget through you, Madam Mayor, to council. So our mission and primary goals haven't changed. This comes from our establishing and regulating bylaw that was updated in 2019. But I guess I'll just focus on our primary goal is to provide fire protection through the established level of service, which is done through the ENR bylaw designed to protect the lives, property, and the environment of the inhabitants in our response area. So when we look at that sentence, what exactly is fire protection? What does that mean? So if you love to study the establishing and regulating bylaw, it's a very long document, but I'll try to sum it up in one paragraph. So fire protection means a range of programs designed to protect lives and property from adverse effects of fire, medical emergencies, or exposure to dangerous conditions, including fire suppression, prevention, education, and training of personnel for the delivery of the approved level of service. The 2023 budget is presented as such to help ensure we can continue to deliver those services. Next slide, please, Paul. As Jake already mentioned as well, we had an opportunity to sit with council last week on our orientation, and I think all of this is a repeat of what you already know, so I'm not going to spend time on that. But again, those 5 divisions come from our establishing and regulating bylaw, and you were able to tour almost all the fire stations, so you know where they are and the equipment that we have. So we'll move on. If there's questions that you've come up with since the tour, then I'm happy to answer those at the end. In 2022, the fire department vehicle replacement plan achieved the following. We designed a 4-door rescue pumper. That's a first for us. We awarded the RFP, and although we anticipated the delivery to come this month, it's been, due to the world that we live in, it's been delayed to coming out early 2023. Our Rescue 4 vehicle, it's in Warsaw, was scheduled for replacement in 2021. It's still in fair condition, and our suitable replacement that we would like to do won't currently fit in the station that we have. So we're delaying that in hopes that we might be able to have a new station in the future and get the right vehicle for the next 15, 20 years. We also had 2 of our rescue pontoon boats that were originally put in service in 2012. just prior to me coming here. They were put on a 10-year life cycle. Again, we have upgraded one engine on one of those and moved that over to another boat, and the boats themselves are in good condition, so we've extended that off to 15 years. On equipment, we were able to finish our stabilization kits so that every station has an initial kit to respond to motor vehicle accidents to help with stabilizing vehicles. As you may or may not know, we don't have large monitors on the top of our fire trucks, feeding those with the large volumes of water that they require with no municipal hydrants is always a challenge. But there is applications and stuff that we need to have those at times. So we're able to put in one of those large stream fire nozzles. Doesn't go on the top of the truck, but it's a ground monitor. It's centrally located here and can help with all stations, as they would all be paged to a fire that size anyway. We have airbags that we use for lifting in certain different situations, again with rescue type of equipment. One set was expired, so we added a second set and replaced the expired set. So now with our deployment of response to motor vehicle accidents, it's always at least a 2-station response. So now an airbag set will arrive at any MVC. We were able to replace 3 of our forestry pumps that was funded by our fire permit revenue, and 14 expired fire helmets. For fire stations, as you know, I know you didn't visit the Station 5, but it was completed a couple of years ago, and we had a grant opportunity that came through. So we're doing those renovations at Station 2 now. It is near completion. In addition to those funds, we had budgeted in 2022 for a new potable water tank due to the well challenges we have there, and a septic system that will meet our future requirements and needs. So that's an exciting project. And again, both of these station renovations are, as a reminder, just the good work from our firefighters and leaders at those stations and our community support on these things. So next slide, please. So most of the slide we'll kind of go over, and again, if there's questions, we can talk about that again. So in 2023, we look to finish off some of our multi-year projects, and we'll highlight here in some things that we've been planning for a while, including, as Jacob mentioned, our Fire Station 4 in Warsaw, which is the joint building with Public Works. As you can see on our tour, it's in some dire need of attention. So we need to either spend a significant amount of money, or I think the better option is to go somewhere else. So that's why that's in the budget. After that, Station 4 is done, we have one station in Donwood, our Station 1. It's a 55-year-old building that was originally as part of our original 3 Enduro ward. And we have outgrown that with our personnel needs, our apparatus sizing. And so it's just something that we need to address. So we have budgeted some money to try to come up with the best plan on how to move forward with that station. We will receive that new pumper in Station 2 and being Douro. That was budgeted for in 2022 and will be, I believe, the only carryover project that we have in the fire budget for 2022. A master fire plan was recommended from our service delivery review. So a lot of organizations are doing that, as well as a community risk assessment. Often one third-party vendor can combine those two to save a little bit of money instead of doing them both separately. The community risk assessment is legislated and due by July 2024. So we want to get ahead of that in case there's anything that we have to tidy up. We don't want to be behind on that one. Our pressure fans, we just had an uptake in the need for these. We've historically only had 2, one at every other station. So we're just looking to make sure that each station has one. So we'd like to purchase 2 of those this year, get them at one at every station. And moving forward, maybe next year we'll try to retire the one gas powered one that creates some challenges as well in its operation when we're trying to clear out possibly CO or smoke, and we're introducing exhaust gases that are sometimes hard to manage. So that's what that's about. Fire paging is is and could be a considerable project that's going to affect most of the fire departments in the county. So that's something that we're working through. We've been working on it for several months now. So we have a contingency plan, but the service provider is no longer going to be in the business. So we're looking at options on how we're going to be able to move forward, continuing with paging for emergencies. Fire Station 2, just the last piece on that puzzle. When we went on the tour, I believe I pointed this out, but we were changing that 3-bay garage into a 2-bay fire station with some added rooms on where the 3rd bay used to be. There's a new entrance there. Some of that area had to be dug up for the renovations, and then there's also a natural low spot there that is near the entrance that pools water all the time, where everybody has to go through to get into the building. So the idea is to deal with that section there. The parking lot itself is massive. It's not all in the greatest shape, but that's the worst area. So this is not a budget to replace the whole parking lot that covers Public Works, the library, and the fire service. This is mostly just trying to get that water to get away from the front of the renovation of the fire station. Next slide, please. As mentioned, our Station 1 analysis that we just already talked about, the master fire plan being done. We're not sure what that's going to create out of those, whether there'll be some challenges or opportunities that we'll need to address, whether that's good news or more challenges with funding. We won't know that until we see the report. For 2023, we haven't accommodated for additional training requirements to meet the mandatory firefighter certification that we've been chatting about for the last on and off. We thought it was canceled, then it came back, but the regulation has passed. So we plan to work on a plan this year, because we do have time. So that's the key. Even though it has passed July 1st of 2022, there's really 2 portions. The first portion kind of being our bread and butter of firefighters that are doing most of the work on our service levels will be effective January 1st, 2026. And then July 1st, 2028 comes into the specialty rescues like our ice water rescue and stuff like that. So, how we're going to address that, it could be, as we work through with the plan, it looks like it's going to be another large future training needs that we're going to have to try to manage, and we may need a little bit of extra help to achieve that. Next slide, please. I think everything on here is, other than bunker gear, again, this is just, we've been doing small, 3 sets of gear or 2 sets of gear, depending on the numbers that we're looking at. Sometimes we may have new gear, but, maybe that firefighter that left or retired was 6'7", and we really can't get that to fit most other firefighters, so we just budget a little bit, anticipating what we have coming in for recruitment. We will be coming up, I think, in a couple of years back to our larger purchase on these, where they expire at 10 years. So we can't introduce those into any type of interior firefighting at the age of 10 years. Even if they've never been into a fire, it's still the same rules, unfortunately. Our helmets, I think there's a duplicate here that we'll fix on the next presentation, but this slide and the next slide, I think number 5 is the same. That's a duplicate. Again, just we have some helmets. I think most people have probably seen us or been aware when we made these changes, but we went from the traditional fire helmet to more of a future type of helmet that looks more like a European style for a variety of reasons. So we have some of those, the last of our yellow traditional helmets that we were starting with our recruits on. Those are getting, this year's the 10-year expiry of those. Parking lot we talked about, Station 1 we talked about, and the master fire plan and community risk assessment we talked about. So that's us in a nutshell. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Chief. Before I hand it over to council for questions, I think what we'll do, folks, is after this section before we start with the next presenter. I'm just kind of more letting staff know than anything. We'll take a short recess, perhaps even just to stand up, stretch your legs, and grab a drink of water, and then resume the rest of the presentations. Perfect. So any questions from council of our fire chief on what's been presented? Deputy Mayor Nelson.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. Chuck, I just thought about out in front of the building there. I don't know what your thoughts are to get rid of that water, but are you kind of thinking about a small drainage pipe out to the ditch, or what were you thinking about to kind of help get rid of that water out of there?
Yeah, through you, Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Nelson. We don't have a fulsome plan. We did some preliminary, I guess, talking about that with our Public Works manager. And so I think you can see that it's been patched over at least once to try to raise that up. It is low, so I don't know if it's material underneath it that needs to be rebuilt. But I think with the Public Works portion building that's there at a much higher rate, I think we have the opportunity to kind of try to raise up that whole area that won't affect the bay doors and still be able to slope it away. If not, then we may have to look into some type of catch basin, if you will.
Yeah, sure. Okay, that's great, Chuck. Thanks.
Councillor Vervoort.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. I know that the training requirements aren't necessary until 2026, but given some of the other capital expenditures that we're looking at over the next few years, are there any preliminary estimates on what that training could potentially cost?
Through you, Madam Mayor, and to Councillor Vervoort, I don't have a number for you there. There's a lot of different variables that are involved in this. There's a lot of different Ontario seal options versus full certification options. That's why I want to fully understand. There's lots of chatter about different opportunities, but there's still some, I guess, implementation plans that have to be finalized until we fully know what that's going to be. The good news is that, you know, going back to I think it was 2015, we had a system called grandfathering when they changed from the Ontario fire standards to the NFPA fire standards. So with the certification, anyone that was grandfathered is going to be recognized as certification equivalent for all those members that were here at 2015 and previous. If they've moved up, you know, since then they'll have to recertify. You know, let's say they were a firefighter in 2015 and they got certification for firefighter. If they became an officer or an instructor, they're still gonna have to get those certifications, but our numbers for that piece are quite low. We have some 2015 firefighters till, you know, probably, you know, even till now, I guess, that they'll have to do they're possibly being able to do some more training. There is an option in this new policy that or regulation that allows them to what they call legacy, which is another word for grandfathering, but they've already done that, so they can't do it again. So we have some opportunities there as well. We just need to really fully understand, you know, are we able to multi-tier between some firefighters being Ontario SEAL, some firefighters being fully certified, how that may impact us, making sure that it doesn't affect our full service, because the service level that we provide currently would be equivalent to a full certification fire department. So we're looking at those opportunities to say, you know, we don't want to lose anybody. And maybe there's an opportunity that some people that can't meet certification will still be able to do an Ontario SEAL and maybe do, you know, 90% of what we do. But we have to balance that out, and we need to know what that means. There is other influence factors like insurance ratings, underwriters stuff, tanker shuttle, that it's expecting 15 firefighters at a station. So there's some questions that we still need to fully understand before we can put that plan together. The good news is that because of our training center being in Nora that we've been using here for quite some time, many of our firefighters that that I've hired since I've been here in 2013, they have already been fully certified. So we have a good number of firefighters that have already been down that road. So it's some of the stuff moving forward, like pump operator, we didn't have to certify before. That's going to be a new requirement. So that's not something that we've ever had to come challenge with. So that will be a new challenge and come with a price. The firefighter 1 and firefighter 2, those are the ones that we're doing certifications to now. Before this, we gave people the option that if they were not comfortable with tests, they're more skills people that do a great job, but testing is not their forte. There was no requirement before to be certified, so we have some people in that group that were trained. We have the training records for Ministry of Labor, but they weren't certified. So we have a little bit of gap that we have to fully understand, but there's still a few more questions that I want to get answered before we jump into the wrong plan.
Super. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? Seeing nothing further, just one from myself, Chief, as it relates to the asphalt on at the Douro Hall or station rather. I'm assuming we would look at putting something out with potentially another municipality for tendering that work. Should council move forward with that to try and piggyback? We don't do that work in-house. So if we're putting that out to tender, would there be an opportunity to piggyback that work with another municipality or with the county?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mayor. And yeah, so we would definitely look at opportunities. I know when we did the Donwood Fire Station, for example, we were able to piggyback with the county on their, because we got that same pricing and they actually were doing work at that intersection. So we timed it to try to get the best deal because their equipment was already there, and we were able to piggyback on that pricing as a county pricing. So I don't know what the opportunities that are coming up, but we'll certainly look at those and see what we can do to make sure that we do the best bang for our buck.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, seeing no other questions of you, Chief, I think this is probably a good point to pop on for a quick recess. I've got 2:45 right now, even just 5 minutes, come back for reconvene at 2:50. Madam Clerk, does that make sense?
Yes, Madam Mayor, it does. And while we're away, I will put up a sign so that those watching on the live stream are aware of what's gone on.
Fantastic, thank you. Councillor Watt?
Just a quick question before we go on break, and it's not really with the budget, but it's more with my my new Surface here. I noticed Adam had his hand up, but I'm not finding that. Is it a key on the keyboard? Can someone tell me, or is there? I can't find an option to raise a hand. Sorry.
If it's helpful for you at all, I'm not going to be requesting that you raise your mechanical hand. Just put up your normal hand when you want to speak. So so don't worry about it for this meeting, and then we can try and get that sorted for you for a future meeting. And then just as a reminder for you folks on Zoom, it might be worthwhile for you to ensure that you're muted and perhaps turn off your camera while we're on recess. So there's that too. So we'll take 5 minutes. Madam Clerk, do you need anything else on our end?
No, we'll take the recess by consensus. So we're good.
Great. Thank you. We'll be back in 5. Might be a challenge getting everyone back, Paul.
I think they're on their way.
I was trying not to let you see me eating that banana.
Madam Clerk, can you tell if our other counselors are back with us? I don't see any others on screen.
Not as of yet.
There we go. It looks like we have all made it back to the room.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
we're back.
Thank you, everyone, for that brief break, and we'll put it back over to Mr. Kramer for introducing our next presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick note, I know we have a few managers left. I think we could maybe speed up a little bit, just for the sake of time. I don't want to go over. I know we also have a meeting at 5. So if you are starting to speak and you're wondering where to focus on, just make sure you focus more on the operating budget and capital budget discussion rather than your responsibilities. As we said, that has been covered in council training for the most part. So if you just give a really high level, it's in the notes, it's in the slides, and in the budget document for the public to read going forward. So with that, next in the hot seat is Mike Mood, Manager of Parks and Recreation.
Thank you, Paul, and through you, Your Worship, to all of council. As Paul alluded to there, we're going to skip kind of through our summary. The Parks and Rec Department does maintain all of our recreation facilities and parks throughout the township. And we do have a number of facilities and play structures, and we do cut a number of areas of grass. So we can go to the next slide there. I just highlight some of our bigger accomplishments over the summer, or this 2022. Is our South Park rehabilitation project, which is now almost about 3/4 of the way completed, which is very good news. It's coming along. I know a number of you guys saw it at our roads tour, and it's progressing quite well. Another big portion of our accomplishments is the implementation of 2 new full-time staff, a lead laborer and a laborer. This was to help with staff turnover, the duplication of training different staff each year, and just to have more consistency in our department. And then the other big goal or project was the resurgence of summer rentals after working with a number of our local user groups. We've seen a huge increase in our summer rentals, and that's above and beyond due to COVID restrictions. This is going back to 2019 numbers and beyond. So that's been very good and exciting to work with all of our users. So the 2023 budgetary commentary. We are looking at an additional summer staff worker and a parks mower to take on the contracted grass services. These costs are offset with the reduction of the grass cutting in other departments over the next couple of years. So I know Paul alluded or had mentioned that the summer student cost is about $387. And that's basically the difference between what it costs us to cut all of our contracted areas. But by us taking this in-house now, we're kind of getting ahead of the game. Our forecast and from their current grass cutting company has said that it increased by an additional $5,000. They're looking at raising the costs across the board. So we will see another $4,000 to $5,000 savings by bringing the grass cutting in-house, so that over the next 4 or 5 years, it will pay for the mower, and then the life of the mower will actually help the township save even further money. So, which is good. Also, what wasn't noted too, in the past, we always apply for a summer student grant for 2 summer students. We've been successful the last 2 years in getting those positions. We will be applying for a grant for this, so that could be even a further additional savings. A key project for the department will be the restoration of the shelter at Back Dam and the replacement of the shelter at Clintonia Park that was torn down approximately 3 years ago due to its unsafe nature. And we'll talk about that in the upcoming slides. Some future budget considerations. Given the age of our facilities, with the Douro Community Center being 42 years old now, the biggest item that we have to consider is getting a new ice surface floor for the facility. This year we had the second leak in our floor. We were able to fix it with minimal cost because we were able to locate the actual leak. The previous year we weren't able to locate the leak, but we were able to apply a solution through the floor to stop the leak, which helped fix it. But that solution no longer could fix the issue that was happening now, because it only fixes minor leaks. So this new leak, we were lucky that we were able to find it. And to give you an idea, like the leak in the floor isn't very apparent. We were able to find a few drops of moisture on the floor, and we investigated that area in which we found it. So it can be very difficult because the leak can migrate from other areas in the floor to a crack in the floor. So again, we were very lucky. So that is something that we're gonna have to consider. Another one is the ammonia chiller replacement in 2027 of $160,000. As you know, we did have a chiller failure that's in Warsaw, which is a premature chiller failure. So we know all the dangers that could potentially happen if we don't replace this on the recommended times frame schedule. At Warsaw, we are proposing for the new 30 horsepower compressor, $65,000, and that should be replaced within the next 2 years. But we'll talk about that coming up. Same with electrical panel, new condenser due to its age. We also need to consider floor at Warsaw, because that facility is now 40 years old. And then a new Olympia in the following year. It is due for replacement now, but given the condition it was in and the lower hours, we propose to push it even further. So next slide. So the capital projects that we're proposing this year, one is the Back Dam shelter roof. This is to replace the shingle roof with a metal roof. The shingles are deteriorating as well as boards starting to rot and need to be replaced. The metal roof will have a longer life expectancy than replacing it with just traditional shingles. We're looking to create a new shelter at the Clintonia Park. As I said before, the previous shelter was torn down. This project was identified and requested to be completed by the Donwood Parks Committee. And then the new parks mower to take on the additional contracted grass cutting. At the Douro Community Center, we're proposing $5,000 for the replacement of the Olympia room door. The current panels are starting to separate, and we've had to do a number of repairs on it already ourselves. So we're looking to get that done. Next slide. At the Warsaw Community Center, we're looking to replace the water softener for the facility. The existing softener, one is not working, and the other one is in need of replacement. It's fairly old, and you cannot get parts for these units, so we're proposing to replace them. And then, as for our long-term projects there with the 30 horsepower compressor, we are proposing to transfer $20,000 to reserves to help replace this in the following year. And I think that is it. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mood. Council, any questions of the presentation? Councillor Watt.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much, Mike, for that. Lots of activity, lots of things going on. You mentioned the back dam and the shelter, which is definitely needed. It's a really popular spot. I mean, more and more in the summertime, so like that. How are we? And I know this is just a little bit off topic, stuff like that, but to the, I'll say the south of the structure and stuff like that, the land through there, you see a lot of kids kind of wandering and in through and stuff like that. How are we with the poison ivy in there? I know we were doing one time a treatment program to try and get rid of it. Is that kind of done now, or are we still on top of that, or how is that working?
Through your worship, to Councillor Watt. I typically, that was we did spray on with like the county program and the roads program. I don't know if that has been running. It has not been sprayed, I know, in the last 2 years. I don't believe that program is still going with them. They would just take it upon themselves and spray those locations. It wasn't something that we typically budgeted for, but we could look at it if that's not a program they're offering anymore.
Yeah, absolutely, because it is a very popular spot, and I mean, we don't want stuff like that, you know, kids getting all covered in that, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Johnston.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Couple of questions. The number one, the Douro chiller, you said should be replaced every 20 years. When did we replace that last?
In 2000, through you, your worship, sorry, in 2007. So that would put it at 2027.
So maybe it might go till a few more years anyways, right?
Potentially, but it is a TSSA requirement, and our insurer requires this. We would have to provide a lot of documentations, and we have a lot of legal responsibilities as a township, as the owner, with providing safe equipment for our staff and everything. So there is a number of factors that go into it. So if that is the recommendation, replacement time, but we can look at that further when we get to that point.
And the electrical panels, you said they should be replaced every couple 2 to 5 years. But what do they do with the electrical panel? I don't understand that.
Sorry, through your worship. That is an estimation of when we may try to replace it. So in 2 to 5 years, that's not when they every 2 to 5 years they get replaced. It's looking at doing that job work in another 2 to 5 years.
But like, what do you mean by replacing electrical panels? Say you had a
Uh,
200 amp service, you mean you change that?
So in there's controls to turn on and off all the equipment, safety devices, such as and contactors. They wear out over time. There's also alarm monitoring, acknowledgements, just a number of items in each panel that do wear over time. So it's recommended to have that replaced.
Okay,
That's as per Simcoe for refrigeration.
thank you.
Any other questions from council? I have just one, and it's relevant to the park shelter at Clintonia. I see, you're budgeting 14,000 for that. I know, having obviously sat on that committee when that development was happening, that there seemed to be some commitment from the neighborhood and local business to help with that. So is that a ceiling limit cost, or is that would be the township's portion?
That is the estimated cost for the total project through a contractor.
Right. So
If we are
if
able to
there
work-
is community involvement, then we could potentially reduce that cost.
Yes, exactly.
Great, thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Mood? Seeing nothing, we will throw it back over to Mr. Kramer.
Thank you.
Through your worship, just so council understands, the costs shown in these summaries for capital under each department are the total costs. It doesn't get into how each project is funded. You will see the funding breakdown in the capital table provided later in the budget document. Okay. Up next is Christina Coulter, our planner.
Hi, thank you, Paul and Mayor Watson and members of council. So as Paul has requested, in order to keep things moving fairly quickly, I'm going to skip through our planning services responsibility summary, as most of you have already been provided with that. I'll just say we're the first point of contact for the public, agent, applicants, and stakeholders regarding a wide range of planning matters. And we provide guidance on navigating the planning process. That's about it in a nutshell. So for our planning and development operating highlights, some of the 2022 accomplishments, and I can't take credit for most of them. I would give that credit to Martina and Alana. But we did onboard a new full-time planner in June 27, 2022. That's me. Our pre-consultation process continues to be well received by applicants and the agencies, and it's hoped that this process does cut down on red tape and provides applicants clear guidelines when they do get to submitting complete applications. Hopefully, it also reduces costs by narrowing the focus of the required studies. So the number of planning applications has risen and the complexity of the applications has dramatically increased. Again, I'm going to update this number. When I wrote this part, we had processed 31 severance applications for this year, which was tied with the year 2017 for the highest number of severance applications in 22 years. Since that time, we have received 3 more. So we're at 34 severance applications for this year. We worked with the County of Peterborough to submit a new official plan to the province for final approval, and we are still waiting to hear when that approval will come through. And we also partnered with the Building Services Department to launch a new office space and began improving our customer service strategies. So for the 2023 budget, this will be the first full year with the new planner, and we hope to improve services currently being provided and looking to allow for a more in-depth analysis and long-term land use planning to take place. We're hoping to implement and understand and adapt to the new policies once the county township official plan is approved. We'll also be looking to implement some new development application tracking software and related training. So this is the cloud permit software that you'll hear about in this evening's council meeting. And you'll hear more about it through that presentation, but it is something we're hoping to piggyback on with the County of Peterborough and some of the other lower tier municipalities in the county. We'll be providing direction and undertaking some additional training just to enable support staff to be more successful. We have one support staff that I share with the building department, 0.25 of, I think it's a day. The complexity of planning applications continues to increase, so due to the availability of land and changing regulatory landscape. So that will come into play as we navigate through Bill 109 and Bill 23. We hope to continue to provide and promote excellent customer service to all the residents, visitors, and community stakeholders, and we hope to build strategic relationships with partner organizations. So just building on the previous comment, new legislation might result in refunding of application fees if the decisions aren't made in accordance with regulatory timeframes. Initially, that was supposed to take effect January 1, 2023, but there's a movement on the table to move that to July. So hopefully we have a little bit of time to understand that legislation and implement it. And then also with respect to Bill 23, possible loss of conservation authority expertise could result in added consultant fees, either through the municipality or putting that back on the developer, the applicant, regarding expertise in ecology, biology, hydrogeology, and those types of fields. So for future budget considerations, there will be a need to overhaul the township's comprehensive zoning bylaw once the county township official plan is approved. And we will need to begin creating new policies to guide our planning processes to reflect this new planning legislation. Next slide, please. So there's only one capital project for the planning department, which is the update to the township's zoning bylaw. This is legislated that the zoning bylaw must be updated within 3 years of the approval of the new official plan. So we do have 3 years to implement that. And at this point, the new official plan has not been approved. The total expected cost, we're thinking will be likely more than 80,000, but 40,000 was put into reserves as part of the 2022 budget. And we're proposing an additional 40,000 to be set aside for the 2023 budget. And if it doesn't start in 2023, we would be looking to put that into reserves and begin the project in 2024. How was that for quick?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Any questions for our planner, Ms. Coulter, on the proposed or on the presentation at this point in time? Seeing nothing, it looks like you're getting off clean on this one, Christina.
Thank you.
Okay. I think between myself and Alana, we're going to tag team building services. Now, one of the things I want to point out for building services, council's aware of the staff turnover. So, the manager position is currently vacant, and therefore, that's why there's Alana and I are chatting on this together right now. I can go through the highlights that have been submitted. The 2022 construction season was extremely busy. Permit volume has continued to increase over the last few years. And I think that has changed the staffing requirements in the department. The building department also completed or substantially completed renovations of the basement area to accommodate their office space due to expansion of their staffing. Looks great down there. And they hired an additional building official and bylaw enforcement officer, which is one person combined, not separate. For budget commentary, council should understand that the building department's budget is self-funded. So any changes to the building department is entirely funded from permits. If there's ever a deficit, that would be funded through their reserve. And any surpluses also go into their reserve. And so given the high volume of permits the last few years, the building department reserve is at a healthy balance at the moment. I don't have that number offhand. I will be sharing the complete listing of reserves to council at a future date, but as part of the 2023 budget, it is forecasted to purchase an additional pickup truck. There have been funds put away specifically for this starting last year, and the rest will be obviously expensed this year. This is due to the additional staff. So right now at a cost of $48,500. So the second truck being added to the building department fleet would prevent the use of personal vehicles during the busy summer months, especially with the septic program. I know that is in flux, and there's going to be future discussion on that. But the plan at this time is to have two trucks in fleet aged 4 years apart on an 8-year life cycle. Just please note that some of this commentary was part of last year's budget, so it may not have been updated appropriately. So between Alan and I, if there are any questions, we can do our best to answer.
Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, either one, Paul or Alan, and maybe we don't have a complete answer on this one yet, but it's kind of a two-part. With the storm that happened in May, I know we were inundated with buildings and parts of buildings and stuff that went down. There has been discussion at council that I guess number one question: are we still getting applications coming in due to the storm, or is everybody kind of at the point now where at least they've got their application in and ready to go forward? That's my first question.
Who wants to tackle that?
It's a tough one to answer because I mean it's an unknown, but I mean have they died down? Let's put it that way to slow down with the applications.
So unless Alana can answer, I can bring this question forward to the building department staff and get you an answer.
That's fine. There's no big rush on that one. My second one relates to when we discussed it at council, and it was with our former CBO. Depending on the permit itself, if the insurance company was also paying the building permit, then we were going to go with that. But if the person themselves had to fork out a permit and it was due to the storm related, we had discussed about waiving that fee. Is that something that the current building officials know that we did discuss? And I can't remember whether we actually passed a ruling on that or whether we just discussed it, to be quite honest with you. So I'm sorry about that.
So I can't comment on what I haven't had that discussion with the current building staff, but again, I can bring that comment forward and get you a response.
I believe that's continuing to be the practice. I'm sure they're aware, and I do recall that, Councillor Watt, but we'll ensure that that is continuing.
Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. The building department reserves, where all can that be used? I understand that that's where it should be used, is for the building department. But can that reserve, depending what it is, periodically be used for something else?
The quick answer is no.
Who makes that decision?
It's legislated in the.
Okay,
I
as long as it is, if it's not
Yeah.
just in-house.
Yeah, so for it to be self-funded, the revenues that we collect are based on a certain amount of expenditures, a certain amount of volume, and also a reserve target level. So the idea is that reserve is there for periods of lower development, and that we can continue to have a building department that can serve the community. And the cost to the residents is kind of mitigated by the years of high growth for the years of low growth. We know historically that is the case. Growth is cyclical, and it's just a matter of time until you have a low growth year. You never know what's going to cause it. Whether who saw a pandemic coming that would stop growth in or any work almost essentially completely in 2020. So you never know, but that reserve is there for those down years, but also for any capital purchases that are required.
Just along that line, the development charges that we have sections that it can be used in. Is the building department one place that the development charges sometimes can be put money towards them?
So no, we have 5. So given that building department is self-funded and development charges are for growth related capital,
Okay.
the amount of capital that the building department is actually going to need is actually going to be quite little. I know we have a truck purchase in here, but that is to be funded through permits. The building department is not an eligible service under the Development Charge Act. The areas that we have for development charges are general government, which pretty much is studies. You cannot fund an administrative service or building through development charges. Roads or transportation, fire services, parks and rec, and library. Those are our 5 services that are development charge eligible.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff on the building department capital projects? Seeing nothing else, let's keep moving.
Okay, and I believe this is our last one. We have Maggie from who is the CAO of the Library Services.
Hi. I will also, in the interest of time, skip a little bit over this first slide. All of this information is in the literature that I sent home with everybody during the orientation last week for library. So if you want to go to the next slide, Paul. Library services, operating highlights, our accomplishments. So I came into this role and to the library halfway through this year. So I'm about 5-6 months into this position. So I've seen us sort of pivot back to in-person service and program delivery. We spent a lot of time and energy marketing, getting people back into the library and launching new programs. The Friends of the Library, which are also a really active volunteer group, also organized some well-attended events. So we've had a lot of in-person visits to the library. Membership is growing. Since 2022, or January 2022, sorry. We processed 129 new library card registrations. So for comparison, we processed 67 in 2020 and 59 in 2021. Almost half of our library members are considered new members, so we're definitely growing. Again, we logged a lot of volunteer hours, 190 to be exact. We are participating in the Ontario Library Service Broadband Connectivity Project. So that connects the library to broadband, which is often a huge upfront cost. So that's great that we're getting that, as well as 1 year of internet fees covered by this project. So that's going to be great for patrons, great for the library, and just the building in general as an asset. We finished our community room. That was started under my predecessor's tenure, but we finished it this year. We're always working on community partnerships. Those bring more services to our patrons, and they make us more attractive to different ministries for different grants. And last but not least, we continue to provide a safe point of contact for anyone in our community who needs a place to connect. Next slide. Okay. So yes, we are really hoping to update the half of our library that just needs revitalization. It hasn't been painted, repaired, drywalled since 2008. And compared to our other half of the library that is very popular, it really shows the difference. So that's why we're looking for that. It's also where our computer lab is. And with getting broadband internet up and running, we do expect a lot more need and a lot more people coming in to use that. And the other major ask or increase, I suppose, that the board is looking for is just an increase in the wage budget. Staff turnover has been a problem for the library, and that increase would allow us just to really focus on our strategic plan. And if we ever wanted to work towards accreditation, just increasing the level of the standard level of service that we provide. Future budget considerations, an increase in online resources and licensing. Those are really great assets for the library because we're a very spread out community, as you know. So anything that's an online resource that people can access from their homes, I think always is going to help us grow, help us gain new members. Programming equipment, again, the adult nonfiction space, and computer lab. In the long term, it's no secret that the library board over the last couple of years has really looked hard at how much we can grow in this building. We've held one of our board meetings at the Douro Community Center, for example, to sort of investigate whether or not that might be a good spot for us to move to. I have not seen the Greenview report. That was before my time. My understanding was, though, that it did assess this building, summarize some of the problems that it has. So again, that's been a long-term goal for the library board for a few years now, and continues to remain one. Next slide, please. Okay, books and material. That is what we've spent every year. It's standard practice for library collections management. I think it comes from our public library operating grant. The drywall repair and painting. Excuse me. That I went over. Like I said, it hasn't been painted since 2008, and some of the parts of the wall are in pretty rough shape. The awning. So that covers the steps up to the library. It's not heated, so if we didn't have that awning, it would be a lot harder to keep it free of snow and ice. So that's why we are asking for that. Again, new flooring, it would just be a revitalization of this building that we're in. It is very tired, it is very old. The last one, the water filtration system, that came from a report that Brian did earlier in the year. We were struggling with our water. We have the same well problems that the fire hall beside us has run into. The library board did end up using some of its reserves to, you know, clean out the well, get some plumbing done on the building so that we could maintain reliable running water for our patrons, so that the washrooms were working, etc. We have drinking water, but the water filtration system is, my understanding from that report, past its useful life, and it's a decision whether or not to replace. I think that's it. If anyone has any questions.
Thank you for that, Ms. Pearson. Council, any questions of the library CEO? Wow. All right, another one gets off easy.
I'll ask one question to the chair there.
Councilor.
Books and materials, you got down 14,000. Is that kind of in line with they have in the last X number of years?
The last three or four budget years that I've taken a look at, it's remained at that. The way we have been doing it is that the public library operating grant that we get goes to that. So it hasn't changed. Go ahead.
We still get a grant?
Yes. Yeah. We the money came in a couple weeks ago, I think, for next year.
And that that's for books and material?
That's how we've used it, yeah.
So is that 14,000 including the grant? Like it would be a lot more if we didn't have the grant?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Yeah, the 14,000 that you're asking for there, if we didn't have the grant, would it be a lot more?
Yeah, it would be. It would be 14,000 more, I suppose.
So that's taking off the grant.
Yeah.
And just to touch on that momentarily, that is also used not just for books, like you're saying, books material, but like e-resources and you know, subscriptions, licensing software, that kind of thing for the online platforms that are used.
We use it to keep the collection up to date. The collection grew starting in the 70s when it was, you know, a hodgepodge. And by doing this collections management, we're able to make sure that, that it stays up to date and to the standard of other libraries of our size.
Mr. Kramer, were you going to say something?
Yeah, just on some of the funding in terms of the books and materials. Just to clarify something, I know in the past, before I got here, that budget was being entirely funded from development charges. Now, one of the challenges is every year we were pulling from development charges, and the amount being added was not keeping up. Sometimes when new development charge studies get implemented, what is planned continues, whereas my approach is to contribute based on the actual fees that we're bringing in. So given that the development charge reserve, and this goes for almost all of our reserves, went into negatives, I pretty much the last two budgets haven't funded anything from development charges. And that's what I was alluding to earlier, is that, you know, given we've had some better growth numbers the last 2 years, there is some funds there that I feel comfortable now allocating out. All of the reserves, I think for the most part, have bounced back. And this goes for library as well. So that will be part kind of the, when I take a look again at the capital financing and funding. And so the operating grant just so happened, I think, to be equal to or very close to the 14,000, but it will support the library budget one way or another. So.
Thank you for that clarification. Any further questions from council on the library presentation? Seeing nothing. Where do we go from here? What's next?
So I guess it'll be one last opportunity to ask any questions. Otherwise, our recommendation is for council to receive the presentation and budget document. And then we will proceed with updating as much as we can and filling any gaps, and then continuing to receive questions from council going forward. And we will, look for information. And I know that Councillor Johnston referred to, there are some major items in here where additional information will be required and needed, and that will be provided to council over the next few meetings.
Great, thank you. Before I hand it over to you, Councillor Johnston, I just want to say thank you to you, Paul, Alana, and all of staff for the work in pulling this together. I know it's a long process that starts months ago, and we're just seeing it kind of formally for the first time. As you said, it is the staff's budget, really. It's kind of that wish list of projects that are, hoping for. And I think over the next several weeks, we'll have, as a council, have that opportunity to turn it into council's budget and really take ownership and direction over that. And of course, the next opportunity, as you'd mentioned, to do that in a public forum is on January 17th at our council meeting, where we'll have that public meeting. The public is invited to participate in that as well, and can speak at that meeting, and then we'll have more conversation formally as a council. Certainly in the interim, council, as you had expressed earlier, Paul, can forward questions through to the respective managers, and you're suggesting that you be copied on that correspondence so that you're kind of able to help channel that and respond to maybe more detailed budgetary questions. So I encourage council to do that, but certainly now I open the floor to the rest of council to make any comment or question. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, the chair. Number one, thank you for the presentation. It's somewhere to start for sure. The zoning, just one question, and we don't have to address it right now, but the zoning bylaw, which we said we've already put away $40,000 for it. And very well, we got another, I think we said maybe 2 or 3 years before we got to do it. That's one thing right there off the bat that I probably would want to extend for another year. Anyways, that's not probably the time to talk about it, but I'm saying that very loudly for myself. I would like to see that not put in this year's budget. But anyways, there's something for us to talk about.
Thank you for that. Any other comments from members of council? Questions? Seeing nothing, could I get a motion to receive today's presentation? Councillor Watt, Councillor Vervoort, all in favor? That motion carries. I have to look back over at my agenda and see what's next. I think that's it. We just need a motion for adjournment. Is that correct, Madam Clerk? Yes. Deputy Mayor Nelson, you've got your hand up. I'm assuming that's why. And Councillor Johnston, that seconded. All in favor? That carries. We will reconvene as a regular council meeting at 5 p.m. and that will be in the council chambers, folks. So we will see you